Welcome to Your Mind is Trying to Kill You podcast. Join your host, Alexandros and co-host Vincent Byrne as they walk you through the deepest recesses of the mind and how it operates. They discuss all the reasons why our minds persistently get in the way of our evolution, growth, and our success. But crucially, they also teach you what you can do to change your destiny. And now, here's your host, Alexandros.
Well, hello and welcome to the 39th episode of the infamous Your Mind is Trying to Kill You podcast. I'm your host, Alexandros Megas.
And I'm your co-host, Vincent Byrne.
And today we're going to talk about something that I was inspired to talk about after I read a quote by Rudolf Steiner. Rudolf Steiner was this Austrian philosopher, architect. He was an occultist, esotericist, and clairvoyant by his own right. And he's got many quotes out there, but one that I shared with a friend of mine, or an acquaintance, a colleague, was the following. Check this out. It's really interesting. More than 100 years ago, Rudolf Steiner wrote the following: "In the future, we will eliminate the soul with medicine. Under the pretext of a healthy point of view," in quotation, "there will be a vaccine by which the human body will be treated as soon as possible directly at birth, so that the human being cannot develop the thought of the existence of soul and spirit. To materialistic doctors will be entrusted the task of removing the soul of humanity. As today people are vaccinated against this disease or that disease, so in the future children will be vaccinated with a substance that can be produced precisely in such a way that people, thanks to this vaccination, will be immune to being subjected to the madness, quote unquote, of spiritual life. He would be extremely smart, but he would not develop a conscience. And that is the true goal of some materialistic circles. With such a vaccine, you can easily make the etheric body loose within the physical body. Once the etheric body is detached, the relationship between the universe and the etheric body would become extremely unstable, and man would become an automaton, for the physical body of man must be polished on this earth by spiritual will. So the vaccine becomes a kind of Ahrimanic force. Man can no longer get rid of a given materialistic feeling. He becomes materialistic of constitution and can no longer rise to the spiritual. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? So, what is this gentleman saying is that in the future, and that was over 100 years ago, mind you, he says in the future, you could be vaccinated by such a substance which will pretty much eject your soul, your conscience. It would make you averse to all this spiritual mumbo-jumbo bullshit, and it would make you embrace fully the conscious mind, the rational mind, and make that a god. And through the conscious mind, through the help of all rational thinking, you would be driven to only achieve one thing: materialistic happiness, materialistic bliss, right? So I thought this show today would be titled "In a World of Automatons, Be a Human Being." What do you think of that? And what do you think of that quote?
Wow, there was a lot to embrace, a lot to take in. As you were, I suppose my first thought was to relate to obviously the impending vaccine that's coming down the line. And then the more I listened, the more I thought, have we not already had this vaccine? Have we not already had the mind being taken away from the soul and from spirituality through the use of the media and communication methods, which have already sent most people away from this line of thought and reflection? And we are entirely focused on material things and pretty much worship them at the moment. So that was where I went on the particular journey as I listened to what you were saying. And I think there are, I mean, you see it in not too far from where you live and I live. A lot of people have been driven entirely by materiality and been prepared to compromise conscience and decent and reasonable behavior and all the stuff that goes with that in exchange for getting power, getting wealth, being able to subjugate other people. So it's already happening as I see it.
Yeah, exactly. I feel exactly the same way. That's when I first read this in the beginning, I felt the same way. I was like, oh, vaccine. But then I'm thinking, whoa, we probably have had several doses of that vaccine already. So the one of the most amazing parts is the way that people respond to such a thing. Because I read, like I said, I was talking to someone, and I read this quote to them, and they started laughing and calling me names. So it was just even the concept of relaying something like that, right? It should be a reason for prosecution, and if that isn't the exact proof that this quote is 100% accurate, I don't know what is. Because what are we talking about here? We're talking about the destruction, the elimination of individuality, of critical mind, critical thinking, which of course is something we've been dealing with on pretty much on every episode that we've had so far, because the critical factor, the critical thinking part, is that which separates someone who lives their entire life in a hypnotic trance and someone who awakens and sees what their life is about. That is, as I would call it, the hive mind. And this is what exists all around us, the hive mind.
Yeah.
What is the hive mind?
The hive mind, to me, is essentially the idea that people need to stick together. They need to conform with whatever the hive or the group actually needs. And they don't stray. And if they stray, there will be an initial attempt to draw you back in. If you continue to stray, you'll be cast out and basically ridiculed in order to ensure that nobody else gets the same idea. Because the whole idea is to keep everyone down at the same level, working for the same objective. So people who are critical in their thinking, people who do, let's call it heroic things, who see a sense of doing their own individual thing, their own hero's journey, as it were, they're cast out unless once they do it, they're seen to have achieved something that the group subsequently acknowledges and accepts and maybe praises and then uses in order to feed itself, I suppose. So it's just about keeping people together, keeping them down, and preventing people from being themselves. The automaton behavior, and they criticize or try to limit and restrict the human behavior.
That's right. It's precisely that. And of course, the hive mind is like there's no individuality in the hive mind. I mean, think of it this way: it's like a beehive, right? Within a beehive or an ant colony, no one has the right, or no one is encouraged to have an individual perspective. Everyone must share the common perspective, one way or the other. There's no way you can stray from it, and you gotta do what you're told. And if you do, then you'll be happy, and if you don't, then there's going to be consequences and repercussions.
Yeah.
So I see that. I mean, this is a great metaphor, and we started talking about that unbelievably evil type of vaccine that Rudolf Steiner is talking about, that would pretty much render your spirit, your individuality, obsolete. It just wouldn't even, it wouldn't be able to survive, to still be connected to your body, because your body would have become a different kind of housing. And that to me is a horrifying thought. The more horrifying part is, of course, because both you and I bet you very many other people would see that this is already, to a large degree, already accomplished. It's already done.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, who is anyone, generally speaking, of course, anyone who is preoccupied with thinking, deep thinking and spiritual thinking and philosophical thinking and all this kind of stuff, it's either some kind of lunatic or some kind of, scholar that is just babbling nonsense. And it's like, if people are like, oh, that's interesting. It becomes like this specimen where people entertain the concepts of a philosopher, but it's just like for that was it. It's like going to the theater, it's like, and like watching a movie that is thought provoking, and people think when they do something like that, they have a feeling that they've accomplished something, that they've done something. Like when I know, because I've experienced that many times, so people have intellectual conversations, and there's people within my friends circle. There has been several people all throughout the years that craved, to get together like once a month or whatever, and sit down and talk about all these deep thoughts that somehow they didn't have in their everyday life, and the night would leave them feeling a little more connected, a little more sophisticated, a little more, a little smarter, and a little more spiritual. But truth be told, you, as the man said, knowing the path is not enough. You have to walk the path.
Yeah.
And so many people in today's world are, of course, completely integrated with the hive mind and pay no attention to any such bullshit as, deep thinking, all these crazy conspiratory concepts, about aliens, or about, spirits and entities and magic and the occult and hypnosis and all things like that, shamanism. Because how can that help you make your life better? And by make your life better, I mean, increase your income and do all the things and buy all the things that you always wanted to buy, right? So the hive mind is the threat. It's a serious threat to this society. I mean, threat. It's already taken over, as far as I'm concerned. But the few fragments that I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if at some point soon people like us are liable to be institutionalized, right?
Yeah.
Because we are a threat to. Oh, I saw, like, for example, I saw J.S. Spears' a Facebook account. You know who that is, right?
The guy, the guy with the long red hair, the yoga guy.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, he's hilarious, but he is a modern day Greek philosopher.
Yeah.
There was Diogenes, actually, who used to talk in similar fashion, like approach everything, making fun of everything, be sarcastic, be facetious, be funny, but in essence, just like George Carlin used to do, roast the status quo because, what else are you going to do? So this dude is being threatened. He took a screenshot of whatever, his Facebook channel was, the health of his Facebook channel. And he was telling him that you're very, very close to being completely banned from Facebook because you keep on violating our standards. Now, I mean, wow, yay democracy, man. I love it. Land of the free, home of the brave, my brother.
Yeah. As long as you sing the right song and do what you're told, of course. The thing is, it's always been there in one form or other. I mean, so it's no surprise that someone would say what they said 100 years ago, and I'm sure it would have been valid, and I'm sure people would have said something similar 1,000 years ago. I think the difference is that the reach that I suppose the world has become very small, whereas 1,000 years ago it was physically large, but it was small in small areas, small groups, because people couldn't get around that easily. So the messages that might have been subversive it was possible to suppress them, and it was also possible to keep relatively small groups of people all indoctrinated and following in the same, the same hive here, there, and everywhere. I mean, I suppose what we're talking about is that instead of having thousands of hives, we're coming down into single digits in terms of the number of hives potentially. And for me, the issue is, I mean, one of the things that came up when you were reading that, and I was thinking, given what we know about the spirit being the thing, as it were, that is continuous and the body is just transient, the idea that the spirit could be literally suppressed or eliminated is not a possibility, because that assumes that the spirit is in the body as distinct from the body is attached to the spirit, which is more the reality. But I think the paying attention to the spirit and paying attention to what it's about and where we come from and what life is about is something that is being eliminated. Certainly it's been eliminated further and further up into the age groups, probably only to the point at which people start to say, what was my life about, when they're in their 80s on their deathbed, rather than giving it any consideration before. Because now even religion, even with all its flaws in all its different forms, is being eliminated pretty much as well, other than in a very extreme way. So the idea of people taking time out to reflect on what's this all about, even if it's only for an hour on a Sunday or a Saturday, is not even happening that much anymore. So people aren't even doing that. So I think the idea that the spirit could be eliminated, that's not going to happen. I also have a sense that the spirit's not going to take it lying down either. But I do think that there is, a kind of a group think going on, and has been going on for a while. The more and more of this homogenous media has been fed into us, that essentially is causing us to forget about, rather than eliminate, but to forget more and more about who we are and what we're about and where we come from. And to me, it's one of the principal reasons for the rise of narcissism and the extent to which people will lie and cheat and abuse and do whatever they need to do in vast numbers. It's not just the odd tyrant here and there. It's vast numbers who are taking on this as a legitimate way to live, on the basis that they couldn't give a flying fuck about anybody, and they will run over anyone in the middle of the road just to get to the other side. I think the idea that is has become quite a normal scenario is testament to the fact that the virus has already taken hold, or the antidote that Steiner talks about has already been injected, and it's given rise to almost like a different type of hive. It's like a hive of aggressive bees, as distinct from the ones that are just working to serve the queen and behave like that.
But think of it this way, though. Given that all the beings that belong in the hive are working, you just said it, working for the queen, which is funny. It's kind of ironic, isn't it? The hive is working for the queen. I mean, I'm sure you can relate to that. Yeah. But what happens when the hive is given the imperative and the perspective that there is a threat, there's an imminent threat? So, right, which is what you just said about, now they start becoming really violent and threatening.
But what I was going to say was like I think the kind of the hive mentality is there, and I get that when the hive has been threatened, the hive will get together and they'll see off the threat. They have to protect the hive and the queen. But I think the dangerous thing, or the thing that's shifting, is that there's a use of the hive mentality, but what you have is, instead of, I suppose you could say, passive, obedient bees doing their turn within the hive and behaving that way, you now have I think a mentality which is layered on top of that, which is that I will take whatever I want to take for myself, and that there's enough within the hive of those people that they themselves become a hive. So they do what they do to maintain the hive, but they're doing it from a place not of being passive and just worker-like and all of that. They do it from a place of everyone being aggressive and everyone being for themselves. And I think that's one of the areas where, as it were, the soul gets forgotten, because, what's good and what's bad and what's right and what's wrong, which in many respects is what holds societies together, starts to get challenged, because people are seen to be rising up and getting into positions of power and acquiring wealth. And they're doing it very clearly and very openly by abusing people, by screwing them over, by ripping them off, telling lies, all that sort of stuff. And that's praised and lauded as being a valid way to be. So now they're not exceptional, they're part of the norm. That's what I think has shifted significantly.
That's right. That's definitely the case. And it's also the fact that the conditioning goes deeper. See, what I was talking about is like, yes, most people are lovers of that way of life, which is, let's get rich and screw over, who knows? I mean, who cares who gets screwed over? It's the survival of the fittest, or the fattest. And there is, of course, this mentality that is being fed to the hive by the queen. Sorry. But it's also the fact that if I am the queen and I need the hive to behave in a certain fashion, then I will throw certain ideas into the collective mind. And those ideas would be like, well, all the people that are not thinking like the hive, it's like communism, right? Isn't it? Or 1984 kind of behavior, 100%. If you're not thinking like us, you're not just a different person. You're not just another individual. You are a threat. You are threatening the cohesiveness and the health of the community. You become an enemy, right? And what happens to that enemy? That enemy has to be rehabilitated or eliminated. Isn't it amazing that only a few years ago, well, it was, a couple of decades, 3 decades, or however long, but that's still a few years ago, that techniques like practices like frontal lobotomy and and shock treatment, they were state of the art. This is state of the art science, man. Science rules. Science knows what's up, right? So how would you come up against this? There's no way. You have no say. It was like back in the McCarthy era here in the U.S. Like I think it was in the 50s. Right? Someone could just point at you. It's like, look, Vincent, he's a communist, and that would be enough. You didn't have to either display any behavior that was providing proof that you were a communist, nor did you have to say anything about it. The fact that someone accused you of it would be enough for you to be blacklisted in your life, have your life be ruined. And we're going right, back to that, it seems to me. Now we have people that are going up, this whole, of course, the amazing era of the masked world and masked nations and the vaccine-driven initiatives. You have that exact same behavior. If you dare to question any of that stuff, you are not just brain dead. You're not just a moron. You're not just completely ignorant, but you are a threat. You are a threat that must be eliminated. You got to be put in a box, a padded box. Right? How dare you? But I thought, one would think that in this day and age, that kind of behavior would be laughable. That nobody could actually say something like that on a mass scale and be believed. The fact that you can walk outside. What was it like who was it in LA, in California? Was it the governor of California? I don't remember. But I think it was, the governor of California that mandated just a few days ago that walking is illegal. Walking in California, man. In California, walking is illegal.
Yeah. You gotta get your roller skates out.
I don't understand. I don't understand. And then, of course, you have the people. Look, I'm not trying to pass myself as a revolutionary spirit here. People say, oh, go into whatever establishment, you gotta wear a mask, and like, fine, I'll wear a mask, whatever. But the fact that I'm wearing a mask doesn't mean that I feel safer, nor does it feel that I am protecting someone else's life. And that's, of course, based on many scientific facts. See, I have in my family, my brother is a biologist, a naturopathic doctor, and a very deep thinker, and he has extremely advanced knowledge of a lot of those things. And he's not the only one. I mean, he lives in Greece, but he, within a group of scientists, they are trying to be heard, to talk with a certain degree of rational thinking, man. Because I mean, okay, we can all agree that rational thinking is cool. We like it, but where is it?
Yeah.
I don't see it. I don't see it at all. I mean, there's literally nothing rational about this shit's happening here. And all I see, of course, look at me, having been in having been in the propaganda industry and knowing all this stuff about all these things, hypnosis and so on, and following all the ways in which the mind can either find ways to free itself or the exact opposite, be subjugated. I see the parallels. Symbolism. You see, symbolism is extremely important to the people in power. And anyone who thinks that the people in power are not connected to occult ideas, principles, and practices are very naive. Of course, they're not just naive; they're also ignorant. Because how would you know? How would you know to tell someone's behavior if you didn't know anything about that behavior, right? Like if I told you that a person who is autistic displays this kind of characteristics, would you be able to, when you came across an autistic person, would you be able to understand what that's about? Would you be able to know that these people, for the most part, they're not retarded, they're not brain dead, they're actually hyper focused. They could be the exact opposite. They could be brilliant. But would you know that? No, you wouldn't know that. And what they would display in the way that you could decode would be that they don't understand. They have no cognitive understanding, right? So,
Yeah.
so if I am, let's say, we were just laughing about that before. Let's say, just for a second, just for argument's sake, that magic was real. Like magic, like you see in Harry Potter. Let's just assume that it was real, and you knew about that, and I knew about that, and so, I mean, it wasn't that dramatic, right? You wouldn't go poof and things would change, but you get my drift. We'd be able to like cast a spell and completely rearrange events in the outer world. So if you could do that, if you knew you could do that in a society that not only is fully convinced that this is utter and complete bullshit, but the society has no concept of what's involved in such a practice, right? So if you then went ahead and did all these things and influenced people and influenced situations and took advantage of things and people, and nobody could pin you, that kind of thing, because as far as everyone else is concerned, that's impossible. It's impossible for you to do that. So if it's impossible for you to do that, how could anyone accuse you of it? Do you see? So going back to what I was saying, symbolism, which is a very deeply embedded in occult and esoteric knowledge, shamanic knowledge, and the like. Why is it embedded in there? Because it is the language of the subconscious. We've talked about that before. And why? would we care about the language of the subconscious? Because, as we know, the subconscious mind is the fuel and the magic with which we can accomplish things. So if we could influence the subconscious mind, we influence situations. So then it would make perfect sense to say that if I were, a king of antiquity, and I had a way of influencing the subconscious mind of a group of people, I would then also, in some way, influence the outcome of the events that permeate these people's lives. Yes. So, if that is correct, why wouldn't I do that? If I could do that, why wouldn't I do that? Especially when no one can pin it back, because it's like back in the day, or even now. Let's say that you influence someone. Oh, there's like this thing. It's actually a proven thing that the military of all big countries has dedicated substantial amount of resources, funding, and we're talking about ESP, we're talking about psychic spies and the like, which of course to the average hive mind is insane and funny and ridiculous.
And it's fine in a Jason Bourne movie.
It's exciting then. But here's the deal. We know that these countries have put in millions upon millions of hundreds of millions of dollars into this kind of practices and these kinds of research. Why the hell would they do that if they were getting nowhere with it? I mean, that's the definition of insanity, right? Burning money, flushing it down the toilet for something that's complete and utter bullshit. And then on top of that, if we knew and if they knew that it wasn't complete and utter bullshit, what's the best way to pass that into the public hive opinion and perception? You would pass it as if it were completely utter bullshit. Of course you would. Why wouldn't you? Why would you ever agree that this shit is legit, right? So, symbolism. I'm going back to that. You see an entire world now that is being pushed almost violently to be covering up their entire face outside of the eyes, which is, I mean, what does this mean symbolically? You completely eradicate your facial expression.
Your individuality.
Yeah, your personality. Yeah, your personality is completely wiped. You are becoming quite literally an automaton. You could be a robotic being. Because for all intents and purposes, most people look alike. If you get to kind of like let's assume we would shave everyone and have them pretty much be at the same height, more or less. Would you be able to tell an individual in the crowd? Of course not. So this is a deeply embedded command. It's a hypnotic command that says to the subconscious, your individuality not only doesn't matter, but it is threatening. It's dangerous. It's time to get rid of that bullshit. And of course, people would say, what are you smoking, man? This is ridiculous. It's crazy. It's crazy talk. It's only a temporary issue. Of course, like 9 months later, this is becoming worse. And when does it end? Perhaps when we all get vaccinated.
When Harry Potter comes along and produces at the same time a vaccine, all of the major players are all able to do it at the same time. And they're all able to do it in record speed, half the time that it would normally take to get to a minimum viable product, according to more eminent scientists than me. And properly tested would normally take 7-8 years. Harry Potter has swooped in on his broomstick, and apparently it's safe after 9 months.
Of course, absolutely. And why wouldn't he be? But you see, it's not even, if we don't even go there, if we don't even go there, we must examine what is happening with the mask. The mask. I see my little girl, my 7-year-old, my 7.5-year-old, and her girlfriends, or her friends from school that she doesn't get to see in person anymore. Right? It's another thing. We don't even socialize. The kids don't even socialize anymore. I mean, that very basic, rudimentary understanding of being a human is being removed. And if they ever have to get together in person, they hide behind the masks. Now, the most tragic part about that, the part that makes me horrified, is the fact that they already see that as a normal thing to do. You understand? Talk about conditioning, my brother. This is it. They don't give a shit about you and me, because hey, we're, for all intents and purposes, we are goners soon. Right? They don't care, but they care about a society of little people that will be the ground foundation of generation that will not only accept that stuff, but will know for a fact that this stuff is totally normal. They will be nothing to force. These kids could, for all, think about it, for all intents and purposes. I mean, now there's like fashion versions of the mask. As a matter of fact, I bought one of those. It's like a steampunk, rendition of like the leather or whatever. You know what I mean? But I was like, hey, if I'm gonna be at my gallery and have to wear this freaking thing, might as well look cool. But think about it though. Now already all this shit's happening. Now you go to Gap, right? Gap.com, and there's a section where you can get a mask. Do you understand how insane that shit is? So
what I find interesting is that there was all of this stuff over the past few years in places, in particular in France, I think, but in a number of other countries, where when you had Muslim girls in school, in high school, and then in college, and they were opting to wear the yashmak, and there were all kinds of movements about the fact that they shouldn't be allowed to wear it because it was discriminatory one way or the other. It was hiding stuff. It was preventing people seeing who they were. It was, etc., etc. And we go from a situation where you have society, as it were, railing against it because it was a symbol of a religion that they were afraid of, or certain elements of it, to a situation where now society is flipped completely and is saying it's okay and it's normal, and in fact you must wear it. Forget all the stuff we said a few months ago about it not being appropriate or and not right for these people that were threatening us to be able to show their individuality. It's okay for us now to all wear the masks. So
absolutely, but it's not. This isn't just okay. It's not okay to not wear them, because you are an asshole if you don't wear them. You see.
Yeah.
I mean, wow. And of course, I have to say there are a lot of people that do see the absurdity of this bullshit, but there are also a lot of people, I come across them every day, that will crucify you for daring to even think like this.
I think there's the nature of the whole thing. It's caused people to get to a point where, on the one hand, they're tired and weary. And we all know that torture, one of the principal methods of torturing and breaking people down in a wartime situation is to get them tired and weary before they'll talk. And the second thing is that people have been deprived of the way that they were living before, and they long for all of that. Being able to go out, being able to socialize, being able to come and go as they please, not been restricted in their homes, been able to go on foreign holidays. They long for all of that, and it's not that long ago when they had it. They just want it back. And then along with this weariness, they're almost at the point of saying, just give me whatever it is I need to take to get back to normal. And I think that's the point that people are at. That's why you're not getting critical analysis of how it is you can produce a vaccine in not less than 9 months, literally 5 minutes after the thing. How is it that all of these competitive organizations that would normally be suing each other or trying to steal each other's ideas, etc., have all managed simultaneously to produce vaccines, and they're all 95% to 95% effective? I mean, it's bizarre that should happen. I mean, they didn't even bother trying to stagger it a bit, and one had, got there first and managed to make a lot of money out of it before the others caught up, which is usually what happens in the scientific pharmaceutical business anyway. But this time, no, they all actually rode in pretty much 5 minutes after the presidential election was kind of declared, and they all come in and do this. And it's just like, I'm just observing this, and I'm saying there's a lot of things that don't add up here, and nobody seems to be asking the question. And then the other side is, we've had so many years of people having, had to take claims against various pharmaceutical companies around the side effects of vaccines, and even that act in 2005, when you were basically prevented in the US from suing these manufacturers. There was. Oh yeah. That's the other thing. That was removed. Yeah. So all of that was removed, and so you have all this. So they're able to produce it with impunity, basically, and you still have all these side effects from various vaccines that go on, or that are given. And here we are. We've run up. A number of them have produced this thing. Like, where in logic and rational thinking is it reasonable to say that they've all got it right, and that it's all been tested sufficiently to actually been put out into the population? It's just very simple stuff, but nobody seems to be, in the mainstream, nobody seems to be asking the question. And everyone is thinking, well, I'll plan my holidays next year because the vaccine will be out at that stage, and I'll be fine. And I'll be able to go here next year because the vaccine will be out and we'll be fine. And we'll soon be all able to be back to where we were. And yet, nobody's questioning any of this stuff, which you don't have to be anti-vax to just have these simple questions and wonder why no one is asking them.
Oh, but you do. You are, as a matter of fact. Not only are you an anti-vaxxer, if you think like that, but you are just a dangerous, potentially criminal entity. Talk about magic and hypnotic suggestion. That these terms by themselves, they have taken life of their own, right? If you call someone an anti-vaxxer, immediately what happens? Whoever hears that, they get a certain perception of who you are. Oh, this person is insane, right? Someone who just call you that, without knowing anything else about you. Once again, being blacklisted back in the McCarthy era. and someone would call you a communist, and there's nothing. It's like someone threw, uh, an arrow in you that had poison, and it hit you, and that's it. Now you're tagged like an animal. So there's nothing. There's nothing you can do. It's like now all you have to do is just try, do your best to explain yourself so that the other people don't think you're actually insane. Do you see how insane that is, and how violent, how fucked up this shit is? It's like the conspiracy theory term, which was coined by the CIA brilliantly, absolutely, of course, after people started inquiring about what happened to Kennedy with the assassination, because people were like, this doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. This happened and that. Oh, he's a conspiracy theorist. Oh shit! Run for the hills, my brother, because that's it. You've been tagged.
You're a troublemaker.
That's it. Tagged, you're it. That's the game, right? How dare you? How dare you?
But look, I get it. I get it already. I mean, I'm not an evangelist in this area, but I do rail against a lot of the pronouncements and practices of conventional medicine, because I think it's lazy and just money making, and it also is part of the well, that's not the right word, but I'm saying, like, removing the sense of the individual power. The idea that you have to rely on a man with a white coat who gives you a pill or tells you to have something chopped out as a solution to your problem. And you have to rely on it because you haven't got the capacity to understand it or do anything about it yourself. So therefore we will patronize you and infantilize you in order to tell you what you should do. I mean, that has been going on since they set up the crooked medical schools back in the, whatever it was, the early 1900s, when all of the alternative medicine schools were shut down. And there was a concerted effort to essentially introduce the simple diagnose, give it a pill and chop it out approach, which was essentially adopted by all of the US medical schools because they were all sponsored. And they put people who were sympathetic to the view on their boards, and then that just passed across into Europe and Western medicine. So if you haven't, there's a classic example, 100 years ago, of how you had an insidious takeover of minds and bodies when that approach was adopted. And now if you talk about using an alternative approach to whatever ailment you might have, usually it's only acceptable if you do it once the conventional guy has told you that you've only got 3 months to live, and all the chopping out and burning or whatever they've attempted to do to you hasn't worked. And it's okay now to maybe go and get some Reiki, or to go on a juice-only diet, or to adopt a fasting approach or whatever. So it's already not acceptable to go against society and convention in many areas. So the idea that whether you're questioning the vaccine or not, or questioning the masks or not, to me that's just an extension of this. There's nothing new in it at all. It's an extension of what they've created over the years, essentially for profit and control, to ensure that people don't question the fact that the coloured tablets that they peddle to people and make a lot of money off are actually, they're not just shit, they're poison, and yet everyone feels they have to take them. So it's
conditioning. Did someone say conditioning through and through?
Yeah, conditioning. Yeah,
programming.
yeah, absolutely. Okay. And even even when you'd go, like even in Ireland, when you if you mention in certain situations, because we're a hugely beef and dairy dependent farming nation, certainly we were. Like in a lot of places, you say you you don't eat meat or you don't have dairy. It's like you're anti the group, you're anti the society that you're in, because like these people could lose their livelihoods if you said that it wasn't good to eat this stuff. So you can't do it, and that kind of conditioning is already in place. So
Of course. Of course, my friend. And what do you go? I mean, we're just, I feel like we are the crazy people, yelling in a cave.
yeah,
But here's this morning when I got up and realized it's December the 8th today at the moment that we're recording this. And I was overcome by nostalgia and sadness because I know that today is the anniversary of John Lennon's murder. And I realized that nowhere in social media does this even get mentioned. I mean, not even like the more legit channels, like Facebook itself. I mean, shouldn't Mr. Zuckerberg have a post, to revere the memory of this brilliant mind, awesome philosopher, and I don't know why. And then the next thing that I thought was one of his famous quotes, in which he said, "This world is run by insane people, and we are liable to be institutionalized, to be put away as insane for mentioning this." You see, he got it. He knew what's up. So I think this is, not to beat a dead horse, but this is a good point to end this. It's just food for thought, as far as we're concerned. I was thinking the other day, I'm like, maybe we should just do, bullet points, for people to, you know what I mean? To get people who don't have the time. They say, okay, how do you do this? And then how put yourself in trance? Okay, how do you lose weight? Another bullet. How do you recondition your mind? How affirmation? This sort of thing. Which, of course, the successful podcasts out there deal with. Oh man. But why would we do that? Because we have that kind of persistent, insane, morbid perception of treating this thing as a human conversation. And who the fuck wants that?
There's one or two. And that's, I was funny because I was saying to you before we came on that I'm listening to the audiobook of Seth Godin's latest one called The Practice. And one of the extracts from it was, he said, if you're going to do the work not because you believe it's great work, but because you believe it's going to do some benefit for somebody else. Because when you do it for yourself, it's like you're in an echo chamber, and the likelihood is that you're not going to release it. It also is likely not to hit the mark in relation to when you do release it, it actually impacting someone else positively. So he said, do the work on the basis that you want to help someone, identify who that person is or those people are, even if they're only a small group, and go from there, because your work spreads by virtue of the fact that other people share it, not because you're really good at marketing. So for me, the reason I do this, And it's a bit like he said, you got to do the work even if you don't feel like it. And there are days when, in the last few months, when it's been hectic and trying to actually think, what are we going to talk about? It's been hard to do, but we've done it because we have that commitment. And it's always from the perspective of you're getting, even if it's one or two comments saying, that was interesting, really like that. So even if one person hears it and gets something from it and feels like they were changed as a result of listening to what we're saying, either their perspective changed or their life has changed in some way. On that basis, it's true art. And you know this better than I do, being an artist. So I think we just do what we do and we keep doing it. And maybe until we're locked up or maybe until we're banned like JP Sears. Who knows? But you got to keep making the art. That's it. We got to keep talking about this, not because we're self-indulgent and just want to talk about it, but I think it's because we believe that it could make a difference to people if they hear it and they start to take note of some of what we're saying. And the predominant thing is, as individuals, we are extremely powerful. We're far more powerful than we actually realize. And if we do nothing else, even if we're not comfortable in the world and what it's doing around us, if we do nothing else, if we question things, not to be confrontational, but to be curious and get our own answers from sources that we are happy with rather than sources that are rammed down our necks. But if we always come back to the practice that we are more powerful than we are, and we use some of the techniques that we've talked about, we have the possibility to remain as humans in a society which for many centuries has been trying to make us automatons.
Right on, brother. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yes. So we'll keep on doing that. We'll keep on doing that because, we are, you have to be that kind of person. Even if what you come up with is insane sounding, that kind of defiance is actually breathing spirit into the people. In ancient Greece, like in Athens, where there was all this philosophical conversation and debates and all this all the time, it was considered insulting to not have an opposing view. I mean, now take that and bring it in this society and see how much we've evolved. So that's it then. In a world of automatons, in a world that values and rewards the hive mind way of being, and what is the hive mind? Is the mind that doesn't have an individual thought. It's like connecting computers together and having a server. See, that's a hive mind. It's like everyone is being fed off the same server. In a world like that, and I'm sure we all know people like that, be the opposite. Be the individual. Even if just to present an opposing view. Just, for kicks. Just for finding out what's going to happen. What can happen if I think the opposite thing from what you just said, right? So, one way or the other, we need to keep nurturing our spirit, because our spirit is the reason why we are here on this plane. That's all I have to say about that. So until next week then, my friend, thank you for being here. Thank you for your tenacity, and thank you for your individuality, your independent thought.
Others would call it just old age grumpiness.
I have no problem with that. And, you would be perfect if only you would learn to eat meat and dairy like every other normal human being.
I know.
But hey, what are you going to do? You can't have it all in life.
You can't have it all. Can't have it all.
So then, until next week,
let's be careful out there.
And don't let your mind kill you.
Thanks for listening to Your Mind is Trying to Kill You with Alexandros Megas and Vincent Byrne. If you like our show and want to make sure that you don't miss an episode, then we would love if you would subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on whatever platform you're listening to us on. And you'd be doing us a big favor if you would support us by leaving a review as well. It would also be great if you would take a screenshot of this episode on your smartphone and share it on social media. So join us next Wednesday when we talk more about mind hacking and taking back control of your life. Until then, have a great week.